Settle in and let your breathing slow, because you are already moving faster than you have all day. 17,000 miles an hour, quietly falling around Earth and calling it floating. In a moment, you ease yourself toward a small hatch, and the world outside looks calm, almost friendly. But the first thing you notice is not silence. It is the soft machinery of survival, the whisper of fans, the steady tide of oxygen, and your own breath turning the helmet into a private ocean. Tonight, with the Sleepless Scientist keeping watch, you will drift through Apollo-era spacewalking, the suit as a tiny spaceship, the slow chores of heat and cold, and the oddly comforting boredom of doing everything, one careful step at a time. You think you are about to step out into nothing, a clean, quiet emptiness. Wrong. You are stepping into a place that is busy trying to erase you. Not dramatically, not with villains, just with physics, doing paperwork. You are weightless in the same way a thrown rock is weightless at the top of its arc. For a breath, it feels free, but it is still falling. You are still falling. You are falling around Earth so fast that you keep missing it. That is what orbit is, an elegant mistake repeated over and over. Gravity pulls you down. Your sideways speed keeps you from arriving. Congratulations, you have weaponized missing your target. As you hover near the hatch, your body is not relaxed. It only looks relaxed. Inside your suit, your muscles are quietly working, trying to find down in a world that refuses to provide it. Your inner ear is filing complaints. Your stomach is considering a small rebellion. And the fans keep whispering because the suit does not care how you feel. Outside the window, Earth looks like a calm painting. Soft cloud swirls, blue edges, a thin line of atmosphere like a delicate bruise, but you do not get to touch any of it. You do not get to borrow a single lungful. The air you are wearing is all you have. The hatch is small. It is never the heroic doorway you imagine. It is a practical hole ringed with latches, seals, and the quiet fear of engineers. You ease closer, not because you are cautious by nature, but because everything about this environment punishes speed. A fast movement means inertia. Inertia means you keep moving after you meant to stop. In a room, you can grab a wall. Out here, a mistake can become a slow, embarrassing drift that turns serious later. The checklist is your bedtime story. Not poetic, not inspiring, just calm little commands, written by people who assumed you might be tired, or scared, or both. Verify the tether, check the seal, confirm the pressure, confirm the oxygen flow, confirm the communications, repeat the confirmation, because humans are unreliable machines. You do not hear space. Space does not transmit sound. No air means no pressure waves, which means no voice, no clang, no satisfying crunch. The universe is still loud in its own ways, but not to your ears. What you do hear is yourself. Your breath moves through the helmet, and it is louder than you expect. It becomes a tide, constant and intimate. In through the nose, out through the mouth, in, out. It is not soothing because it is spiritual. It is soothing because it means the fans are working and the oxygen is arriving on schedule. And when you finally push out of the hatch, The first sensation is not freedom, it is constraint. The suit does not float around you like clothing. It pushes back, it has structure, it has opinions. Every time you bend an elbow, the fabric resists like a stiff winter coat that never breaks in. You are wearing a pressurized bubble, and your body is a warm, wet animal inside it. The suit is trying to stay inflated. You are trying to move. It is a constant negotiation. Even before Apollo, people knew the basic problem. Vacuum is not a gentle emptiness. If your suit fails, the water in your saliva begins to boil. Not because you are hot, because the pressure drops and liquid water stops being stable. Your body is mostly water. Vacuum would like to make a point of that. So you keep the suit between you and the idea of boiling. Out here, sunlight does not feel like a warm day. It feels like a spotlight. Direct radiation, unfiltered, unapologetic. Step into it and the suit warms quickly. Slide into shadow and you cool fast because there is no air to hold heat near you. On Earth, air is a blanket. In orbit, there is no blanket. There is only what you can store and what you can radiate away. You glance down and see the curve of the planet rolling underneath, slow and certain. It is beautiful in a way that does not require your approval. But it is also the reason you cannot stop thinking about the hatch behind you, because the calm out here is not natural. It is manufactured. The suit hums. The fans push. The pumps cycle. The oxygen flows. The carbon dioxide is scrubbed away. Heat is managed. Water is moved. Everything is kept in balance so you can do something absurdly ordinary, like turning a bolt. And the strangest part is how slow it all feels. Not because time slows down, because your body has learned that suddenness is expensive. Every motion costs effort, and effort costs heat, and heat costs cooling, and cooling costs resources. So you become careful, deliberate, a human doing chores in a place that wants you dead. It is almost domestic, and once you accept that this calm is carefully manufactured, it is easier to notice the one thing keeping you alive. The suit itself. The Apollo-era suit is not sleek. It is not a science fiction exoskeleton. It is closer to survival camping gear that got promoted to aerospace by mistake. Layers, many layers. Against your skin is comfort and moisture management, because you are going to sweat and the suit cannot simply let it evaporate away into the air. There is no air, so it must be managed, captured, moved. Then there are pressure layers, rubberized and strong, meant to hold in an atmosphere while the universe tries to steal it. Then restraint layers, so the suit does not balloon into an unmovable sphere when pressurized. Then thermal layers, insulation stacked like a winter quilt. Then the bright outer cover, pale and reflective to handle sunlight. It is a wearable compromise. You want it to be flexible. You want it to be light. You want it to be strong. You want it to be puncture resistant. You want it to be easy to repair. You want it to be comfortable. You want it to last. Congratulations. You have described something that cannot exist all at once. So, engineers choose good enough, and then the astronauts pay for it with their forearms. Because the gloves are where dreams go to die. Your fingers are inside thick, stiff gloves, designed to keep pressure in. Every time you close your hand, you are fighting the glove's desire to spring back open. Even gripping a tool becomes exercise. Imagine trying to do delicate work wearing heavy winter mittens. Now, add the fact that the mitten is pressurized and actively resists being bent. Now add that mistakes cost time, and time costs oxygen. Apollo astronauts complained about hand fatigue constantly. They did not complain because they were weak. They complained because the physics was honest. Inside the glove, your fingertips are trying to feel latches, connectors, and handholds. But the glove dulls sensation. Your brain has to adapt, using pressure and vision instead of touch. You become slower because that is the only speed that works. The suit joints help, but they are never perfect. The elbows and knees are designed with convolutes, those ridged, bellows-like segments that bend. They are clever. They still resist, and the suit always wants to return to its neutral posture, straight arms, straight legs, like a formal uniform that disapproves of your ambition. When you lift your arm, you feel it. When you twist your torso, you feel it. When you turn your head, you remember the helmet is a rigid bubble, and your neck is not steering anything. You are turning your whole upper body like a cautious animal. The backpack is the quiet hero. In Apollo, the portable life support system is your personal atmosphere factory. Oxygen goes in, carbon dioxide comes out, heat is hauled away, water is managed, communications stay steady. The whole thing sits on your back like a stubborn child. Without it, you are a soft creature in a hard vacuum. And the outcome is not ambiguous. Oxygen is not just for breathing. It also helps flush your exhaled carbon dioxide away from your face, because CO2 is sneaky. It does not stab you. It just makes you tired, foggy, slow. It whispers you toward sleep at precisely the wrong time. Carbon dioxide buildup, confusion, a sense of panic. And in a suit, you do not get to open a window. So air circulation is not optional. The fans that sounded annoying inside the craft become the most reassuring sound you know. And heat is the other enemy that does not look like an enemy. You might think space is cold because we use the word cold for emptiness, but your body is a heat engine. Even at rest, you are burning fuel. When you work, you burn more. In a sealed suit, that heat has nowhere to go unless you push it out deliberately. On Earth, sweat evaporates and carries heat away. In a suit, sweat collects. It becomes sticky. It becomes clammy. So Apollo suits used cooling systems, and later designs refined them into liquid cooling garments, networks of tubes that carry heat away like a tiny plumbing system. It is not glamorous. It is plumbing. It is always plumbing. And everything about it is shaped by mass. Every extra layer, every stronger seal, every more flexible joint weighs something. In spaceflight, weight is cost. Weight is fuel. Weight is engineering risk. So the suit becomes a series of choices, each one a trade. More mobility means more complexity. More complexity means more failure points. More failure points mean more checklists, more training, more time. So, good enough wins again. And you, inside it, learn to move like someone carrying a heavy pack through deep snow. Not fast, not free, but steady. And because the suit is always negotiating with the environment, you start caring less about the stars and more about the sunlight. Sunlight is not a gentle thing out here. It is not a warm morning through a window. It is raw radiation pouring into you without asking. When you float into direct sun, the outer layers of your suit start absorbing energy. The bright white surface reflects a lot of it, like a pale coat in summer, but not all. Some heat still builds. When you drift into shadow, the heating stops instantly. There is no twilight, no soft fade. It is like stepping behind a wall. And then your suit begins to lose heat by radiation, sending infrared energy into the void. It is the only way to cool out there. Radiate heat away, like a glowing ember that no one can see. Conduction needs contact. Convection needs air. Space gives you neither. Radiation is what you get. You learn the strange truth that cold space is not cold the way a freezer is cold. A freezer robs heat with moving air. Space is an isolator. If you are insulated, you can stay warm for a while. But if you are exposed to sunlight, you can also get uncomfortably hot. So the danger is not one temperature. It is the swing. The suit is built to slow those swings down. Insulation, reflective layers, controlled cooling. But you still feel it because humans are sensitive instruments, and because your hands and feet are vulnerable. You notice it in your fingertips first. Even with gloves, the sensation of warmth and cold seeps into your awareness, not sharply, just as a quiet background change, like the difference between standing near a window and standing near a wall. The Apollo astronauts learned to respect this, not with fear, more like a tired respect for a moody appliance. If you work too hard, you heat up. Your heart rate rises. Your breathing gets heavier. The cooling system has to keep up. If it cannot, you start to feel damp and overheated, a sticky discomfort inside a place where discomfort can become risk. So you pace yourself. The choreography of an EVA is not athletic, it is patient. The checklist is built around pauses. Stop, confirm, rest, check your consumables, check your tether, check your partner. Taking it easy is not laziness. It is temperature management. It is oxygen management. It is fatigue management. Even the simplest actions have hidden costs. Reach for a handrail, and the suit resists. You grip harder to compensate, and your forearm burns. Your metabolism climbs. Heat builds. You breathe more, and the life support has to move more air. The fans get louder, so you move with an almost exaggerated calm. Slow is smooth. Smooth is safe. Safe is expensive, but cheaper than dying. And sometimes you catch yourself wanting to hurry because your brain still lives on Earth, where hurry is a habit. But out here, hurry is a way to create a problem that takes 30 minutes to undo. You also learn that you cannot feel temperature the way you expect. The suit insulates you. The sun heats the outside. The cooling system chills parts of you. Your body becomes a layered sandwich of sensations. Warmth at the shoulder, coolness along the torso, dampness at the back, a gentle chill in the fingertips. It is not one environment. It is many, stacked together. And as you hover there, drifting between sunlight and shade, managing your heat like a careful cook, you also have to manage something surprisingly ordinary: breathing. Your breath is constant. You hear it, you feel it in the helmet. It is a steady ocean sound that never leaves you alone. Inhale, and the air feels dry, conditioned, engineered. Exhale, and moisture joins the loop, because you are a walking humidifier. Every breath adds water vapor. Every moment adds heat. Your skin adds sweat. Your eyes add tears, even if you are not emotional. Biology is leaky. Moisture management is one of those problems that sounds boring until you live inside it. If moisture condenses on the visor, you get fog. Fog steals visibility. Visibility is safety. So the air has to circulate over the visor. The helmet has to be shaped to guide flow. The system has to stay balanced. It is a tiny weather system around your face, and you are the storm. You also have to avoid rebreathing your own CO2. Inside a small volume, exhaled carbon dioxide can pool near your mouth and nose. On Earth, it disperses into a room. In a suit, it needs help. That is why the circulation matters so much. Carbon dioxide is a quiet saboteur. It can make you drowsy, and not in a cozy way. More in a your brain is underperforming way. The very thing we want tonight, sleepiness, is the last thing you want while holding onto a spacecraft with stiff gloves. So your life support scrubs carbon dioxide using chemicals designed to capture it. Lithium hydroxide was common in Apollo-era systems. It reacts with carbon dioxide, binding it, turning a gas into something contained. It is chemical housekeeping. Your exhalation becomes a waste product, and the suit cleans it up. The phrase closed loop sounds elegant until you realize it means you are living inside your own outputs, constantly processed by machinery. The suit turns you into a system that must be balanced. Oxygen in, carbon dioxide out, heat out, water managed, pressure stable. Pressure is the other big one. The suit holds a lower pressure than Earth's sea level pressure because lower pressure reduces stiffness and makes movement possible. But you still need enough oxygen partial pressure for your body to function. So before an EVA, astronauts breathe pure oxygen for a while to purge nitrogen from their bodies. This reduces the risk of decompression sickness, what divers call the bends. Because yes, spacewalking has something in common with scuba diving. Both involve pressure changes. Both can punish you if gases in your blood decide to form bubbles. On Earth, nitrogen dissolves in your tissues under pressure. If you drop pressure too quickly, nitrogen can come out of solution as bubbles. Bubbles in joints hurt. Bubbles in blood vessels are worse. Bubbles in the nervous system are memorable in the way you do not want. So, the pre-breathe is a ritual of caution, a slow preparation, a way of telling your body, we are changing the rules now. And inside the helmet, as you breathe that engineered air, you notice your own mouth feels dry. Water is available, but it is not a satisfying drink. Apollo suits had ways to provide water, often a small bag with a tube. You can sip carefully without spilling, because spilled water in microgravity becomes a floating hazard. A droplet can drift into equipment. It can cling to surfaces. It can short electronics if it gets ambitious. So even drinking is controlled, a tiny, measured luxury. Food is not really part of the EVA experience. You are not having a snack while clinging to the side of a spacecraft. The suit is a work environment. It is not a picnic blanket. But your body still has needs. And one of the needs nobody puts on a poster is the bathroom problem. Humans produce waste. Space does not care that it is inconvenient. For Apollo-era EVAs, urine collection devices existed, practical and unromantic. The goal was not comfort. The goal was avoiding dehydration and distraction. It is all very dignified, in the way that survival often is. You do not get to be a heroic figure out here. You get to be a mammal in a bag of air, doing chores, managing fluids. The helmet also changes your relationship with your own voice. When you speak, you hear it conducted through the suit and through your skull. It sounds closer than it should. The microphone carries it to your crewmates, and to mission control, and to a world that will later romanticize it. But to you, it is just another part of the loop. Talk. Confirm. Repeat. The voice becomes a tool, like a wrench, and the work pace stays calm, not because you are calm inside, because you act calm. You follow procedure. You make each step small. This is how humans survive hostile places, not by being fearless, by being methodical. And once the suit has your breathing and comfort under control, the next concern is movement, because floating is not the same as going where you want. In your mind, spacewalking looks like swimming, gentle strokes, easy gliding, but in practice, it is closer to climbing a cold, smooth structure while wearing an inflatable outfit. You use handholds, you use rails, you plan where your body will be and where it will go next. If you push off without thinking, you drift. Drifting feels peaceful until you realize you are not actually steering. In microgravity, you do not stop on your own. There is no friction with air, no ground to catch you, so you anchor. Tethers are the quiet reassurance in the whole system, a physical link back to the craft. It is like holding a railing in the dark stairwell of a building you do not trust. You clip in, and you check the clip, and you check it again. Because the clip is not just metal, it is your continued membership in the human species. Astronauts on later missions used multiple tethers, safety lines, and sometimes small maneuvering units. Apollo-era spacewalking was more limited, often involving work on the spacecraft itself, and later, the lunar surface with its own challenges. But even in orbit outside the hatch, you treat the tether like a sacred object. You do not let it tangle. You do not let it float free. You keep it where you can see it, because losing tools is easy. You pick up a wrench and it wants to leave you. Not maliciously, just faithfully following Newton's laws. If you let go, it drifts away at the speed you gave it. It becomes a tiny satellite, a small piece of metal, with no interest in returning. It will orbit for a while, and then, eventually, drag will bring it down, and it will burn up like a microscopic shooting star. Congratulations, you have invented littering on a planetary scale. So tools are tethered too. Clips, loops, lanyards. Everything has a place, and everything must return to that place. Because just holding it is not enough when your hands are tired and your glove is fighting you. Every task takes longer than you think it should. Turn a knob, it resists. Your glove slips. You reposition, you try again. The suit pushes back as your arm bends. Your wrist does not want to rotate. You adjust your whole body to create leverage. And leverage is another strange concept out here. On Earth, you brace yourself against the ground. You push, and the ground pushes back. In microgravity, if you apply force to a stuck object, the equal and opposite force can move you instead. So you have to anchor yourself, hook a foot, grip a rail, create your own temporary ground using your body and the spacecraft structure. It is rock climbing, but the cliff can move you if you are careless. Apollo training for EVA emphasized this kind of planning. On the ground, astronauts practiced in water tanks neutral buoyancy simulations that mimic weightlessness. It is not perfect, but it teaches you the choreography. It teaches you that you cannot just go. You must prepare to go. You must know where your hands will be, where your feet will be, where your tether will be, where your tools will be. You must know what happens if you drop something. You must know what happens if you get tired. The suit itself changes your strength. Your muscles can generate force, but the suit can absorb it, redirect it, waste it. You work harder for the same result, like trying to write neatly while someone presses on your elbow. So you pause often, you rest, you let your heart rate come down. Not because you are weak, but because efficiency is survival. Out there, boredom is actually a good sign. Boredom means nothing is going wrong. Boredom means you are just doing the steps, and you can feel your brain settling into that rhythm. Reach, clip, pull, check, confirm, breathe, repeat. You begin to trust the procedure more than your instincts because your instincts were not designed for vacuum and orbital velocity. Your instincts are for trees, fire, and small predators, not this. The strangest comfort is how normal your work voice becomes. You call out what you are doing, you confirm your position, you report your oxygen. You speak as if you are changing a tire on the side of the road, because in a way, you are. Just with a view that could swallow your mind if you let it. And after you have moved a few careful meters, you start to notice the view, not as a postcard, but as a gentle, relentless reminder of where you are. The planet is not sitting beneath you like a globe on a teacher's desk. It is sliding under you, fast, silent, and indifferent. You watch coastlines scroll past like a moving map that refuses to stop for your curiosity. You think you will feel a grand sense of height. Wrong. What you feel is scale. Earth is so large that down becomes a concept, not a direction. The curve is soft, almost gentle, like the rim of a bowl. But that bowl is full of air you cannot touch. That atmosphere is thin, thinner than your instincts want to believe. From up here, it looks like a watercolor edge, a faint blue smear painted on the black. It is not a force field. It is not a wall. It is a shallow layer of gas clinging to a rock by gravity, like steam, hugging the lid of a pot, and you are outside of it, wearing your own private pot lid. City lights are not part of this view, not in daylight. What you see instead is weather, huge spiral storms, curling over ocean like someone stirred milk into coffee and forgot to stop. The clouds look soft. They are not. They are friction and condensation and energy, doing the same work they always do. You are tempted to romanticize it. The brain loves a story. But the truth is simpler. You are watching the sun heat the planet, and the planet trying to even it out. The tropics get roasted, the poles get less. Air moves to balance it. Water evaporates, rises, cools, falls. a global engine powered by a star that does not know your name. The calmest part is how unconcerned it all looks. Nothing down there is reacting to you. Even the horizon is a kind of insult. That thin blue line is the only reason lungs work. It is the only reason water stays liquid on the surface. It is the only reason you are ever warm in winter. And out here, it is a decoration you cannot use. You also notice something disappointing. The stars are not putting on the show you expected. In movies, space is always a thick spray of diamonds. Out here, your eyes are dealing with extremes. The sunlit spacecraft is bright, painfully bright. The suit is white, reflective, glowing. Earth below is a massive bright disk. Your pupils clamp down, and the dim stars lose the fight. Sometimes you get them in the shadows if you angle your helmet just right. Little sharp points, steady, unblinking. But often, what dominates your vision is not the galaxy. It is the hardware in front of you. The handrail, the hatch, the tether clip, the small scuffs and scratches that prove someone tested this. Your world is a few meters wide, and your survival depends on you staying mentally small, because the view has a way of doing something strange to the human brain. It does not always make you excited. It can make you quiet, not poetic quiet, more like the quiet you get when you realize the ocean does not care if you can swim. You are a creature built to measure distances in footsteps. Out here, distances are in continents. You glance down again, and you catch a moment of night creeping along the edge of Earth. The Terminator line, the boundary between day and dark. It is a slow-moving curve that makes the planet look like a turning coin. It is pretty, yes, but it is also just geometry. A sphere lit from one side, a fact you learned as a child, now big enough to swallow your whole field of view. And speaking of swallowing, you notice how easy it would be to drift a little too far. Not dramatically, not a sudden yank, just a slow separation, a gentle widening gap between you and the craft. The kind of gap that starts as a meter, then becomes 2, then becomes a problem. Your tether does not feel like a leash. It feels like a promise. You check it again because your mind keeps inventing little disaster scenes to stay entertained. The clip is seated, the line is clear. No tangles, no sharp edges. You make sure it runs where it should. You are not afraid of falling. There is nowhere to fall. You are afraid of not being able to come back. The craft is not a home, exactly. It is a tin can with delusions of grandeur, but it is pressurized, and that makes it sacred. It is air, warmth, and a surface you can rest on. So the view stays a background, and the work stays the foreground. You take another careful move, hand over hand, like climbing along the side of a building, except the building is orbiting Earth and your gloves are trying to keep your fingers straight. A small twist of your torso, a gentle pull, a pause to let your body stop wobbling. In microgravity, every movement you make can set you oscillating. The suit has mass. Your body has mass. When you shift, you can start a slow roll, like a pendulum that forgot gravity but remembered momentum. So you damp it out with tiny countermotions. A fingertip press on a rail, a knee tucked in, then extended. all of it slow, like you are trying not to wake someone sleeping nearby. And then, eventually, you have done what you came to do. The bolt is turned, the connector is seated, the inspection is complete. The world did not end. Nothing cracked, nothing hissed. That is the best kind of outcome. Now, you turn your attention back toward the hatch, not because you are tired of the view, but because you are tired of being an organism in a place made for rocks. Getting back inside is not a triumphant sprint. It is a careful reversal of everything you did to get out. You approach the opening, and it looks smaller than it did before. It is always like that. The door out of danger is never as wide as you want it to be. You line your body up with the hatch, and you manage the tether so it does not snag. You keep your tools close. Everything is clipped. Everything is accounted for. Nothing is allowed to float away in a last-minute act of independence. You can feel the suit's stiffness more now. The longer you have been out, the more your muscles have been doing small battles. Your forearms are tired. Your shoulders feel used. Not injured, just worked. The fatigue is not from lifting weight. It is from fighting pressure. Every bend, every grip, every twist was you pushing against a suit that wants to be a balloon. The restraint layers help, but they do not erase the basic problem. Pressurized fabric has opinions. It wants to round out. It wants to straighten. It wants to make you do everything the hard way. Congratulations. You have learned why astronauts look slow and careful. They are not acting. They are negotiating. You put a hand on the hatch rim. Metal, cold through the glove, not in temperature exactly, but in feel. Heat does not conduct the same way through layers, so your brain reads it as distant, like touching something through a thick towel. You guide yourself in, and you have to think about body geometry in a very practical way. Helmet first, then shoulders, then the backpack. The life support unit is bulky. It likes to bump into things. The craft was built by people who measured mass and volume with ruthless honesty. Inside, there is no spacious welcome. There is a small, cramped interior full of hoses, panels, straps, and the stale smell of human presence. The hatch closes behind you, and the first thing you notice is not relief. It is procedure. Pressure equalization is slow, controlled. Seals do not like rushing air. Rushing air carries dust. It pushes on surfaces. It can whistle through places that should stay quiet. You wait while valves do their boring work. You feel the pressure rise, not as a dramatic squeeze, but as a subtle change. Your suit does not have to fight the outside vacuum as hard anymore. The fabric relaxes just slightly. The joints feel a little less stubborn. It is like someone loosened a belt you did not realize was tight. The air inside the cabin feels thicker immediately, not because it is magically rich and fresh, but because your body has been living in the controlled loop of the suit. Cabin air has its own smell. Plastic, metal, a hint of sweat, a hint of machine oil, the quiet signature of life in a sealed environment. On paper, it is still just gas, nitrogen, oxygen, trace chemicals. In your nose, it is civilization. And then comes the small luxury you do not appreciate until it happens. Helmet off. The moment you can feel air moving on your face, unfiltered, uncontrolled, is almost shocking. Your skin notices. Your ears notice. Your voice changes because it is no longer trapped in a bubble. The sound of your crewmates' movements becomes real again, carried through air as pressure waves, not as vibrations through structure. You hear small things, a strap sliding, a switch clicking, a faint hum from equipment. Human sounds, ordinary sounds. They feel almost decadent. Your hair is damp. Your forehead is sweaty. You can scratch your nose with a bare finger, an action so simple it becomes a kind of miracle. Out there, every itch was a philosophical problem. In here, it is just an itch. Your body also registers the after effects of the work. EVA fatigue is a quiet heaviness, not the soreness of running, more like the exhaustion of holding tension for a long time. Your hands may ache from gripping against the gloves. Your shoulders feel like they have been wearing a stubborn backpack, because they have. Your jaw might feel tight from clenching without noticing, and somewhere in your mind, a tiny part of you is still outside, still staring at Earth. But the craft does not let you drift into thoughts for long. There is always another checklist. Stow the equipment, inspect the suit, check for wear, scuffs, abrasions, confirm consumables, report the numbers. The numbers matter because they are the difference between a story and an accident report. Apollo-era EVA taught engineers what breaks first. Not the romantic parts, not the big dramatic parts, the small parts. Gloves. Always gloves. The fingertips wore down from contact with metal edges and handrails. The fabric abraded. Seams took stress. A tiny worn spot could become a future failure, and future failures are what the program existed to prevent. Joints too. The convolutes flexed, and flexing creates fatigue in materials. Seals were checked obsessively. Any spot where pressure meets a boundary is a spot where reality tries to get in. And the human being inside the suit, the soft and clever part, turned out to have limits that were not negotiable. Hand strength, endurance, heat tolerance, focus under discomfort. Engineers could calculate oxygen flow rates and cooling capacity, but they also had to listen to astronauts saying, calmly, that their hands were getting too tired to do the work. That is not drama. That is data. So the lessons were practical. Make the gloves better, even if it is hard. Improve fingertip mobility. Reinforce wear areas. Adjust the fit so pressure does not fight motion unnecessarily. Make tools simpler. Bigger handles, better tether points, designs that can be used with stiff fingers. If a tool works beautifully in a lab, but fails in a pressurized glove, it is not a good tool. Make procedures boring. Write checklists that assume fatigue. Build steps that can be confirmed easily. Reduce the number of decisions an astronaut has to make while their brain is busy staying alive. There is a kind of humility in that. Space does not reward bravery as much as it rewards repetition. People like to imagine early spaceflight as reckless courage, men strapped to fireworks, hoping for the best. And yes, some of it was that. But the deeper truth is that it was an industrial process of making danger routine. The Apollo program was, in many ways, an exercise in turning impossible environments into manageable workplaces. Not safe, manageable. A small distinction, but your continued existence depends on it. Later programs took those lessons and made them more ordinary, more standardized. Spacewalking became something you trained for as a job, not a stunt. Still risky, still complex, but increasingly systematized. The portable life support evolved. Cooling garments became more refined. Carbon dioxide scrubbing became more reliable. Tools and handrails were designed with EVA in mind from the start, not added as an afterthought. Because once you have watched a human struggle to turn a simple fastener in thick gloves, you begin designing fasteners differently. Apollo also taught a social lesson, one that does not show up in engineering diagrams. When you are outside, you are never really alone. You are attached to the craft by a tether, and to the rest of humanity by radio. Your voice is always in someone's ear. Mission control listens. Your crewmate listens. The loop is constant. That loop is comfort, but it is also pressure. You have to speak clearly. You have to report accurately. You have to keep your mind structured. So astronauts learned a kind of calm performance, a way of being tired without sounding tired, a way of being uncertain without becoming chaotic. It is not fake. It is discipline. And discipline, more than heroism, is what lets you borrow a few hours outside the hatch. This is the part that echoes forward the most. Not the flags, not the footprints. The mindset. Train, simplify, repeat. Assume the environment is trying to kill you, because it is. Assume your body will fail if you ask too much, because it will. Assume your attention will wander, because it always does. Then build systems that keep you alive anyway. That is what preparation really means. It is not confidence. It is architecture. And once you start thinking like that, it becomes hard not to look at other places the same way. Because space is not the only environment that would quietly kill you while looking beautiful. Speaking of hostile places with lovely lighting, you can drift your imagination down to the moon. Not the moon of songs and romance, but the moon of powdered glass and harsh sunlight. The surface is not soft. It is regolith, ground-up rock, shattered by billions of years of impacts. It clings to everything. It gets into seams, into joints, into the fabric of suits. It is abrasive, like sandpaper with a grudge. Astronauts tracked it into the lunar module and later described the smell as something like burnt gunpowder. It is the scent of ancient minerals meeting oxygen for the first time in eons. On the moon, the sunlight is unfiltered. No air means no scattering. Shadows are ink black, sharp-edged. You step from blinding brightness into darkness that feels solid. And the temperatures swing again, not with the gentle rhythm of weather, but with the brutal schedule of geometry. Day bakes, night freezes. The ground does not share heat well. There is no breeze to soften anything. You would think the moon is quiet, and it is, in the way vacuum is quiet, but your suit is still loud. Your breathing is still there. Your life support still pumps and circulates. Your world remains a mechanical whisper. You also do not get the comfort of atmosphere as a safety net. On Earth, if you fall, air resists you. On the moon, air is absent. You fall in clean arcs. You land the way physics intended, with less gravity than Earth, but no forgiveness. The famous hopping gait of Apollo astronauts was partly low gravity and partly suit stiffness. The suit did not like deep knee bends, so they adapted, using a bouncing stride that kept them stable without demanding too much joint flexibility. Again, not romantic. Practical. And the moon has one more gift for you: radiation. Earth's magnetic field and thick atmosphere protect life from much of the sun's rage. On the moon, that protection is mostly gone. Solar particles, cosmic rays, bits of high-energy matter that pass through you like tiny bullets. You do not feel them. Your nerves do not report them. The damage is cellular, quiet, statistical. Congratulations, your enemy is math. Apollo missions were short enough that radiation risk was managed, mostly by time limits and monitoring. If a major solar flare had hit during an EVA, it could have been catastrophic. The plan, such as it was, would have been to get back inside fast and hope the spacecraft offered enough shielding. Hope is not a system, but sometimes it is all you have. From the moon, Earth hangs in the sky like a fragile ornament. It does not rise or set the same way, depending on where you stand. It looks close enough to touch, and it is not. That view can make you feel something, or it can make you feel nothing, which is also honest. But the moon is still, in a way, familiar. It is just rock and sunlight and vacuum. Simple hostility. If you want something stranger, you can shift your attention to Mars. Mars looks, in pictures, like a quiet desert, a place you could walk if you had a good jacket. The sky is sometimes butterscotch, tinted by fine dust. The landscape is wide and empty, like an old scar. The trick is that the air is barely there. Mars has an atmosphere, technically, but it is thin, a whisper of gas compared to Earth. Mostly carbon dioxide, with pressure so low that your body would treat it as vacuum for many practical purposes. You could not breathe it. You could not live in it. Without a suit, you would lose consciousness quickly, not from lack of oxygen alone, but from the way low pressure disrupts your biology. Your saliva would try to boil again. Your lungs would struggle. Fluids would shift, not as dramatic as explosive decompression in movies, but fast enough to be a very short adventure. And Mars is cold. Not cinematic cold, not ice palace cold, but the kind of cold that seeps into machinery and makes materials brittle. At night, temperatures plunge. In the day, sunlight warms surfaces, but the thin air cannot hold heat well, so you get sharp swings again. Dust is the other problem. Mars, dust is fine, pervasive, electrostatic. It clings to surfaces, gets into seals, coats solar panels. It is the regolith problem with an added twist, because Mars has weather. Not cozy weather, more like an endless habit of wind moving grid around. A global dust storm on Mars can wrap the planet in haze for weeks. The sunlight dims, solar power drops, the world becomes a muted orange gloom. If you are a rover, that is inconvenient. If you are a human depending on systems, it is a quiet threat. And yet, Mars is still a place you can imagine standing. The gravity is not too different. The day is similar in length. The landscape has familiar shapes, hills, valleys, dunes. It tempts you with almost human conditions. That is what makes it dangerous. It looks survivable, which encourages optimism, and optimism is how you forget a gasket. If you want a place that does not tempt you, you go to Venus. Venus is bright in the sky, a pale beacon. It is often called Earth's sister, which is like calling a crocodile your cousin. Because you both have teeth, Venus has an atmosphere so thick that pressure at the surface is crushing. Imagine being deep underwater, except the water is hot gas and the waves are chemistry. Down there, the air would press on you with the weight of an ocean. Your suit would need to be a submarine, and it would also need to be an oven mitt, because Venus is hot, not summer day hot. Hot enough that electronics suffer. Hot enough that the ground itself seems tired. The heat comes from a runaway greenhouse effect. Sunlight goes in, infrared heat tries to leave. The atmosphere traps it efficiently, relentlessly. Carbon dioxide dominates, thick and heavy. Clouds of sulfuric acid swirl above, not because Venus is trying to be dramatic, but because chemistry happens when you have the ingredients and the energy. The Soviet Venera landers that reached the surface survived minutes to a couple of hours, not because the engineers were incompetent, but because the environment is simply that aggressive. Imagine building a machine that has to work inside a pressure cooker filled with corrosive fumes while the temperature tries to soften solder and warp metal. Congratulations, your failure mode is everything. And yet, even Venus has its gentler layers. High in the atmosphere, the pressure and temperature become more Earth-like. There are altitudes where you could, in theory, float a habitat like a balloon. People talk about cloud cities on Venus because humans love loopholes. We see a hellscape and immediately search for a balcony. But even then, the chemistry is still hostile. The acid is still there. The sunlight is bright. The logistics are nightmarish. The lesson repeats. Survival is not one big invention. It is 1,000 boring protections working together. And while you are thinking about pressure, there is a place you already know that can teach you the same lesson without leaving Earth. The deep ocean. Down there, the pressure increases with every meter. It is steady, patient, and unimaginative. It does not need creativity. It just stacks weight. At great depths, the pressure would crush a human body quickly, not because you are fragile in a moral sense, but because you are full of air spaces, lungs, sinuses, the little pockets that make you light enough to walk around on land. Pressure squeezes those pockets. It forces gases into solution. It reshapes what you are allowed to be. Submersibles that go deep must be built like armored seeds, thick-hulled spheres that distribute stress. Again, mass and shape become survival. And the deep sea is dark, but not empty. Life is down there, adapted to conditions that would kill you without hesitation. Fish with slow metabolisms, soft bodies, strange jaws, transparent flesh, creatures that make their own light with bioluminescence. Because sunlight does not reach, they live in cold that is stable, not swinging. Because water holds heat well. The ocean is a thermal blanket, the opposite of space, but the trade is pressure and scarcity. Food falls from above in slow drifts, a marine snow of dead plankton and waste. Down there, every calorie is precious. Life moves slowly because speed is expensive. It is not an ecosystem built on abundance. It is an ecosystem built on patience. And the comparison to space becomes unavoidable. Both places punish leaks. Both places require pressure vessels. Both places make rescue difficult. Space is a vacuum trying to pull your insides out. The deep sea is pressure trying to push everything in. Either way, The human body is caught between worlds it was not designed for. So you begin to see Apollo spacewalking differently, not as a unique stunt, but as part of a broader pattern. Humans keep trying to occupy environments that are not meant for them, not with gills or fur or natural evolution, but with equipment, layers, pumps, seals, checklists. And it works, briefly, as long as the systems stay boring. The moment the systems become exciting, you have a problem. That is why Apollo taught humility, not in speeches, but in wear marks on gloves, in heat management charts, in the quiet admission that a person can only fight their suit for so long. You can almost feel that humility in the post-EVA routine, the way everything is inspected, the way every small scuff becomes a note, the way the program learns by being forced to, because space does not give you feedback gently. It gives you consequences. And then engineers write new procedures. Even now, inside the cabin again, the suit resting, you notice little details you did not care about before. A smudge on the visor, a spot on the glove, a faint abrasion on the outer layer where you brushed a handrail one too many times. Each one is a story that did not become a tragedy. And speaking of stories, Apollo had a few EVAs that were not the graceful dance people imagine. Some were awkward, tiring, full of unexpected resistance. There were times when astronauts struggled to get back in, not because they were incompetent, but because geometry and stiffness and fatigue add up. You can picture it, your body half in, half out, trying to pivot a bulky life support backpack through a tight opening. Your gloves clumsy, your breathing louder, the radio calm, because it has to be. Mission control, far away, listening to a human being solve a very physical problem with very limited options. The solution is almost always the same. Slow down, reposition, use the handholds, make small changes. Do not fight the suit in a single big movement. The universe punishes big movements. The universe rewards small ones. And that lesson, once learned, does not stay in orbit. It follows you back to Earth, into design rooms and training pools. Neutral buoyancy training, those underwater rehearsals, became a major tool. Not because water is like space, but because it gives your body the same problem. No stable down, no easy bracing. You learn to work with handholds and tether habits. Underwater, you feel drag. In space, there is none. So the simulation is imperfect. But the muscle memory is close enough to teach patience. Astronauts learn to plan their routes like climbers. Where will you put your left hand? Where will your right foot anchor? Which way will your tether run so it does not wrap around you like a slow snake? Even the way you think changes. You stop thinking of yourself as floating. You think of yourself as attached. Attached to the craft, attached to procedure, attached to the thin chain of systems that keeps your blood liquid and your brain awake. That chain is not shameful. It is reality. And reality, quietly, is what makes the whole thing interesting. Because if you remove the romance, what is left is a human animal doing manual labor in a place where manual labor was never supposed to happen. It is turning bolts while falling around Earth. It is wiping a visor while the sun tries to cook the suit's outer layer. It is managing body heat with plumbing. It is staying mentally sharp while carbon dioxide waits patiently for you to get sloppy. This is not a fairy tale. It is industrial biology in an extreme setting. And when you look at it that way, Apollo-era spacewalking becomes less like a stunt and more like an early chapter in a much longer story. A story about building small environments inside big hostile ones. Habitats, suits, submarines, polar stations, even your own bedroom tonight with its controlled temperature and steady air. You live inside an engineered bubble more often than you notice. The difference is that your bubble is forgiving. If your heater fails, you get cold. If your air conditioning fails, you do not instantly boil, most nights. But the principle is the same. A thin layer of technology between a mammal and an uncaring universe. And once you start seeing life that way, it is hard not to keep drifting, mentally, from one hostile beauty to another. Following the thread of pressure, heat, and the boring systems that keep you alive, that thread keeps pulling you toward places that look calm, right up until you do the math on what the environment is doing to you. So you drift, mentally, from vacuum to water. And then you remember a place that has both problems, stitched together with insultingly beautiful scenery. Antarctica. You are standing on ice that is not just frozen water, but frozen time. Layers compacted into a bright, squeaking silence. The air is thin and sharp, and it bites the inside of your nose. The cold is not traumatic. It is efficient. It steals heat from you like a tax. You think the danger is just freezing. Wrong. The danger is how quickly normal tasks become exhausting once your body is spending calories just to stay warm. Your fingers go clumsy first. The fine motor control you take for granted starts missing its own targets. You fumble with a zipper. You drop something. You swear softly into a scarf. It is not because you are incompetent. It is because biology prioritizes the core over the hands. And speaking of core problems, cold air is dry air. Every breath you take pulls moisture out of you, just a little. All night and day, you can dehydrate in a place made of water. Congratulations. You have found irony that can kill you. The people who work there live in systems, heaters, insulation, redundant power, checklists again, boring routines again. It is the same pattern as an Apollo suit, just with walls instead of fabric. You start seeing it everywhere. The world is full of environments that are fine, as long as your little bubble keeps working. And bubbles, eventually, always leak. So your imagination slides back to the Apollo era because those bubbles were carried on backs and the price of a leak was immediate. If you want to understand how precarious it was, you stop thinking about grand views and you think about seals. A seal is a humble thing. It is the difference between air staying where you want it and air leaving because physics is honest. It is rubber and metal and careful surfaces meeting each other with enough pressure to say, no, not today. You cannot see a good seal working. That is the point. You only notice seals when they fail, and by then, the story becomes shorter. Apollo engineers obsessed over tiny interfaces, O-rings, gaskets, pressure checks, latch mechanisms. It was not glamorous. It was the kind of work that never gets a statue because it is too busy preventing funerals. Out there, during an EVA, You feel that obsession in the way everything is slow, not because people are cautious by temperament, because they are cautious by design. Even the way you move near the spacecraft is shaped by the suit's mass and the suit's stiffness. Your body wants to twist. The suit wants to remain inflated and rounded. So the compromise is a kind of stiff ballet. You become good at using your whole body as a lever, a shoulder against a handrail, a hip against a panel edge, a boot hooked under a restraint, tiny shifts followed by tiny pauses so your momentum does not wander off. And when you do it right, it almost feels peaceful, not joyful. Peaceful in the way a well-tuned machine is peaceful. Everything working, everything boring, nothing surprising you. Of course, the universe hates boredom, not emotionally, just statistically. So even in the Apollo era, even in those careful rehearsals and checklists, you still had close calls that were never supposed to be cinematic. On one mission, during an early stand-up EVA, you can imagine the simple problem that arrives like a stray thought. The sun angle is wrong. Glare fills the visor. You cannot see a detail you need to see. You turn your head and the helmet does not turn with it. You rotate your whole torso and the suit resists. You reposition your body and your tether drifts into the edge of your field of view like a reminder that everything is attached to everything else. Then you realize the most annoying truth of spacewalking. When your work site is bright and your target is small, you are fighting your own eyesight. Your pupils clamp down, your visor reflects light, your attention narrows. You squint and you feel the pressure in your face, trapped inside a helmet. The solutions are boring. Visor shades, better angles, better planning. Not courage, not grit, planning. And you can hear that planning in the radio traffic. Calm voices doing calm things, while the background reality is lethal. You call out your position. You call out what you see. You confirm the step, then you do it. You do not skip ahead, because skipping ahead is how the environment gets a vote. What makes Apollo-era EVA special is not that it was graceful, it is that it was early. The language of spacewalking was still being invented. Every complaint about glove fatigue became a design change later. Every awkward body position became a note on future handrail placement. Every scratched surface became a clue about where abrasion happens. Abrasive contact is not dramatic. It is just the slow removal of material, one tiny fiber at a time, until you have a weak spot you did not earn. And weakness in a pressure garment is not like weakness in clothing. A torn shirt is embarrassing. A torn suit is a countdown. So you inspect, you photograph, you log it, you treat the suit like the fragile spaceship it is. Because it is not armor, it is a compromise that only works when treated gently. That is why, after an EVA, you do not just feel tired, you feel a kind of low-grade reverence for air. Inside the cabin, the air is a shared thing. It fills the space, it carries sound, it carries warmth, it lets sweat evaporate a little, it lets your skin be skin again. And it smells like people. Not in a romantic way, in a real way. Plastic, metal, the faint tang of human breath and food and machinery. The smell of a sealed habitat that has been inhabited. Your brain relaxes because your brain loves habitats. It loves walls and stable pressure and a place where up and down are at least negotiable, But the Apollo cabin does not give you much comfort. It is small, tight, full of hard edges. You float near a panel, and you have to be careful not to bump a switch, not because the switch is fragile, but because the consequences are expensive. Apollo was full of these little constraints. It was not built for lounging. It was built for getting there, doing the work, and leaving before luck ran out. So when people talk about Apollo like it was a grand cruise, you can hear the lie in the silence between their sentences. It was closer to camping in a machine shop while falling around a planet. And speaking of camping, your body still has to do body things. After an EVA, you sweat. Your cooling garment has done its best, but you are still damp. Sweat has collected in places that do not air out well. Your skin feels a little tender, a little rubbed. Pressure points from straps and suit interfaces leave marks. Your shoulders might ache where the harness pressed. Your hands might feel stiff and sore, like you have been using hand grippers for hours. Because you have. In Apollo, the glove issues were especially notorious. Fingertips could bruise, nails could ache. The constant push against a pressurized glove is a weird kind of workout, one you cannot train for perfectly on Earth. Even underwater practice, for all its value, does not simulate the exact forces in a pressurized suit. Water supports you. Water pushes back. Water drags. In vacuum, the suit itself becomes the resistance. So you carry fatigue in a different way. It is not the burn of lifting weights. It is the deep tiredness of fighting a stubborn object that you must never damage. And that creates a particular mindset, one that is useful far beyond Apollo. A calm acceptance that the environment does not care, and the system does not care, and your only job is to do the steps. That mindset gets passed forward into later spacewalks, into the way humans treat extreme places. It is why, when you watch a modern spacewalk, it looks almost routine, almost boring. It is not boring because it is safe. It is boring because procedures have been tuned again and again to remove surprise. Surprise is the true enemy. In Apollo days, surprise still showed up. A tether snag, a tool that will not seat, a handrail that is just slightly harder to grip than expected, a visor that catches glare, a checklist step that turns out to be awkward in real geometry. Each one is small, but small things are what kill you in space, because big things are usually prevented by design. And once you accept that, you can start to appreciate the strange intimacy of the view again, not as a postcard, but as a reminder that Earth is a habitat you were born into. From orbit, you can see the atmosphere as a thin line. From inside your suit, you can feel what it means to not have it. The air on Earth is not just oxygen. It is pressure. It is a medium for sound. It is a heat transport system. It is a radiation filter. It is a chemical buffer. It is the reason you can be sloppy sometimes and still survive. In space, sloppiness is not a personality trait. It is a failure mode. So when you imagine other worlds, you stop imagining landscapes first. You imagine atmospheres. You imagine the pressure, the composition, the way heat moves. And that brings you back to those other places, the ones that would quietly kill you, but beautifully. The moon looks like a gentle gray desert, but the ground is hostile to equipment. Regolith is not weathered by wind and rain the way Earth's sand is. It is sharp-edged, angular, abrasive. On Earth, sand grains get tumbled. They get rounded. On the Moon, grains get shattered by impacts, then sit there, sharp, for a very long time. So when you walk through it, it clings to you. It works its way into seams. It scratches visors. It wears down materials. It is dust that behaves like broken glass, because in many ways it is. Apollo astronauts reported that it stuck to everything. Suit fabric, boots, tools, inside the lunar module. And once inside, it became a respiratory irritant risk, because you do not want to inhale microscopic shards. You picture it floating in microgravity inside the cabin, catching light like tiny glitter. Beautiful. Also, a problem. The Moon also punishes you with light, unfiltered sunlight, harsh shadows, high contrast. Your eyes and your camera struggle. You can lose detail in the darkness even when the surface is right there. You can overheat in the sun and freeze in the shade, and the day is long. About 2 Earth weeks of sunlight, then 2 Earth weeks of night, depending on your location. So if you are not at a polar region with special lighting conditions, the thermal cycle is brutal. The surface bakes, then it becomes cryogenic. You survive by not staying too long and by bringing your own systems. Again. And when you look at Mars, you see the opposite kind of deception. Mars has air. It has sky color. It has wind. It has clouds sometimes. It looks like a place you could stand and breathe cold desert air. Wrong. The pressure is so low that your body cannot function unprotected. The atmosphere is mostly CO2, which is not helpful for lungs. The cold is persistent, the dust is fine, and the radiation environment is harsher than Earth's. Less atmosphere, no global magnetic field like Earth's to deflect charged particles, so long-term exposure becomes a quiet issue, not immediate like vacuum, quiet like statistics, quiet like increased cancer risk and degraded electronics. Mars is a planet that kills you slowly, which is how humans sometimes prefer it, because slow danger is easier to ignore. Venus is kinder in that sense. Venus does not pretend. The surface pressure is enormous. The temperature is punishing. The atmosphere is chemically aggressive. You do not fantasize about taking your helmet off on Venus. You fantasize about not going at all. But humans are curious animals, and curiosity is the engine that keeps you walking toward hazards. So you imagine the Soviet landers again, those squat machines that fell through the Venusian atmosphere the way a stone falls through thick syrup. As they descended, pressure increased, temperature climbed. The atmosphere grew dense, like breathing inside a warm drink. At the surface, the landers had to function quickly. Instruments collected data while the environment attacked seals, electronics, and structures with heat and pressure. Minutes mattered. You can almost hear the ticking, not dramatic ticking, the ticking of components drifting out of spec. It is a different version of EVA consumables, not oxygen and cooling, but the survival time of hardware under conditions it hates. And then there is the deep ocean again, Earth's own alien place. The deep sea is an environment where pressure is the main character. It is a steady increase, one atmosphere at the surface, then another atmosphere for roughly every 10 meters of depth. By the time you reach the deepest trenches, the pressure is crushing. It is like having a stack of cars balanced on a postage stamp. Your body cannot tolerate that without protection. Not because pressure itself is evil, but because your internal air spaces compress. Divers who go deep do it with careful gas mixtures and slow ascents. They manage nitrogen, helium, oxygen. They manage decompression because gases dissolve into tissues under pressure, come up too fast, and those gases form bubbles, the bends, pain, paralysis, death. It is the same physical principle that makes pre-breathe necessary before a spacewalk. Different direction, same biology. Down there, life adapts. Soft bodies, pressure-tolerant proteins, membranes tuned to function under stress. The fish and invertebrates do not fight the pressure. They become compatible with it. Humans never do. Humans build shells. Submersibles are pressure vessels, often spherical, because a sphere distributes stress evenly. The shape is boring because physics is boring. When you hear about deep diving tragedies, it is usually not because someone met a giant monster. It is because a system failed, a seal, a joint, a material fatigue crack. Again, small things. So the lesson continues to loop. The universe is hostile, but not theatrical. It is hostile the way a machine is hostile. It does what it does, and if you are in the wrong place, it does it to you. And that returns you to the idea of spacewalking as labor. If you strip away the romance, an EVA is maintenance work done in an environment that magnifies consequences. That is why your movements are slow. That is why checklists are sacred. That is why the suit is not just clothing, but a life support system strapped to a human. When you imagine Apollo-era astronauts outside the spacecraft, you do not imagine them feeling like superheroes. You imagine them feeling like technicians, trying to do a job before their hands give out. And their hands really did give out. Sometimes. Hand fatigue, limited EVA duration. Fingernail pain and fingertip bruising were real concerns. Grip strength is not infinite. The suit makes every grip a fight. The glove wants to open. You want it closed. Your muscles spend energy simply maintaining a grasp. Now imagine doing that for hours. It is not heroic. It is tiring. And yet, the work got done because humans are good at one thing. They are good at making routines and then obeying them. You can see that in the way Apollo missions used checklists for everything. Not because astronauts could not memorize, because memorization is fragile under stress. A checklist is external memory. It is your brain written down so your body can follow it when your mind is busy. In the cabin, after an EVA, you return to those lists. Stow, inspect, report. The rhythm continues. You log consumables, oxygen used, cooling water used, scrubber capacity, time outside. You note any anomalies. A stiff joint, a glove hotspot, a visor scratch, anything that could matter later, because later an engineer will read it and change something. That is the whole deal. Experience becomes design, and as those designs improve, the same pattern moves into later eras. Gemini taught early EVA lessons, including the simple fact that humans flail if they do not have handholds. Apollo refined. Skylab expanded. The Space Shuttle and International Space Station made spacewalking into a repeatable practice with better suits and better planning. Still dangerous, just better understood. Understanding is not comfort. Exactly. It is just fewer unknowns. And when you have fewer unknowns, you can start considering bigger plans, longer stays, more complex work, repair, assembly, construction. You start imagining building habitats on the moon or Mars or in orbit. And then the story stops being about a suit and starts being about an entire environment you must carry with you. A habitat is just a suit you can take off inside. Same problems. Pressure, temperature control, carbon dioxide scrubbing, water management, waste, microbes, materials fatigue, radiation. A bigger bubble with the same vulnerabilities. Even on Earth, when you live in closed environments like submarines or polar stations, the same issues appear. Air gets stale, moisture condenses, mold grows, carbon dioxide levels rise, people get headaches, equipment corrodes. Life is chemistry, and chemistry continues whether you like it or not. So your habitat must constantly push against natural drift. Air wants to equalize. Heat wants to flow. Water wants to condense. Metals want to oxidize. Plastics want to outgas. Outgassing is a particularly annoying one in spacecraft. Materials release trapped gases in vacuum. They slowly emit molecules that can fog optics or contaminate surfaces. Your spacecraft is full of polymers, adhesives, lubricants. In vacuum, some of those substances behave differently. They evaporate slowly into the cabin or into space, depending on location. So you choose materials carefully. You bake out components. You test. More boring work done so the inside of your visor stays clear. And because your bubble is artificial, you also deal with microbes. Humans bring bacteria and fungi everywhere. Skin flora, gut flora, respiratory microbes. They are part of you. In a sealed habitat, microbes can colonize surfaces. They can form biofilms. They can create odors. They can degrade materials. So cleanliness is not just aesthetics. It is maintenance. In Apollo, missions were short, so microbial buildup was limited. But even then, cabin smell was a thing. Stale air, sweat, food packaging, machine odors. In longer missions, it becomes more intense. The International Space Station has had to deal with microbes that grow in damp corners, condensation behind panels, water in tubing, anywhere moisture lingers, because life likes wet places. And you keep bringing water because you keep needing water. So the bubble requires constant management, the same way a suit requires constant management. The same way your body requires constant management, even now, in bed, with your heart doing its small pumping job and your lungs doing their quiet bellows routine. You do not notice it because Earth is forgiving, but take the forgiveness away, and suddenly every process becomes visible. That is what Apollo did. It made the invisible visible. It made breathing a mechanical loop you can hear. It made temperature a balance you can feel. It made pressure a number you respect. And that is why, when you think of other deadly beautiful places, you keep coming back to the same principle. Survival is mostly boring systems working exactly as intended. On the moon, that system includes dust mitigation, keeping abrasive regolith out of seals and joints, brushing suits, using airlocks, designing fabrics that resist abrasion. On Mars, it includes dust mitigation too, plus pressure habitats, oxygen generation, radiation shielding, thermal control. On Venus, it includes not going to the surface unless you are a machine that expects to die quickly. Or you float above, where pressure is kinder, but chemistry is still rude. In the deep ocean, it includes thick hulls, careful ascent profiles, redundant life support. It includes accepting that rescue is slow. And in spacewalking, it includes handrails, tethers, and a suit that is always one worn spot away from becoming a story on the evening news. If you want the gritty truth of Apollo-era EVA, you picture the suit after the work. Not pristine white, scuffed, smudged, dusty if it is lunar, scratches on the visor, worn spots on fingertips, evidence that the environment has been chewing on it. You picture the astronaut inside, peeled out of the suit slowly, with help because the suit is heavy and awkward in the cabin. You picture sore hands, wrinkled skin, sweat cool too quickly. You picture the quiet moment of sitting there, floating, hearing cabin fans, and feeling your face in open air again. Not as triumph, as relief. Relief is an underrated emotion in spaceflight. Triumph is for speeches. Relief is for survival. And the relief is always temporary because the mission continues. There is always another task, another checklist, another system to monitor. Even sleep is scheduled. Even rest is part of procedure. So, if you are still drifting with me in this calm late-night tone, you can let your imagination take one more small step outward. Not to a planet this time, but to the things that share your environment in orbit. Because while you were out there, turning bolts and watching Earth slide under you, you were not alone. Not in the emotional sense, in the physical sense. Orbit is cluttered. Today you hear about space debris as a modern problem. And it is, but even in the Apollo era, you already had micrometeoroids, natural debris, tiny particles moving at obscene speeds. A micrometeoroid can be as small as a grain of sand. In orbit, speed is the weapon. At orbital velocities, a tiny particle carries the energy of a bullet. It can pit surfaces, crack windows, damage radiators, puncture thin materials. Spacecraft are designed with shielding, Whipple shields, layered barriers that break up particles and spread out impact energy. But a suit is more vulnerable than a spacecraft hull. It has layers, yes, but it is still a wearable system. Micrometeoroid risk during EVA is low, statistically, but it is never zero. And that is the haunting part. Most risks in EVA are things you can manage with behavior. Tethers, procedures, checklists. Micrometeoroids do not care about your checklist. They are random, like the universe's way of reminding you that control is always partial. So you accept that too. You accept that survival is never guaranteed, only managed. And you might think that would make spacewalking feel terrifying, but humans adapt emotionally to what they can do something about. When you have steps, you feel agency. When you have agency, you feel calmer. That is why the checklist is soothing. It takes the infinite terror and turns it into small actions. Clip the tether, confirm the seal, check oxygen, move slowly, do the next thing. That is also why when people imagine dying in space, they imagine drama. In reality, the danger is often quiet. A slow leak, a rising CO2 level, a cooling system struggling, a glove tear that starts as a scratch. The universe does not roar. It hisses. And because it hisses, your training teaches you to listen. Not to space, to your instruments, pressure gauges, flow meters, oxygen levels, carbon dioxide readings, temperature indicators. Numbers, yes, but numbers that translate into sensations. A slightly harder breath, a warmer back, a fogging visor edge, a headache beginning behind the eyes. Your body becomes a sensor suite, and you learn not to ignore it. In that way, spacewalking is strangely intimate. You are aware of your own biology in a way you rarely are on Earth. You feel your heart rate, you hear your breathing, you notice sweat, you notice thirst. You notice how quickly a small discomfort can become a distraction, and a distraction can become a mistake. So comfort becomes safety. That is why suit designers care about things that sound trivial. Glove, fit, helmet padding, ventilation flow across the face, cooling garment temperature, pressure distribution on shoulders and hips. Small improvements add up. Apollo taught that. And the reason those lessons matter is simple. Humans keep wanting to go back out there, not because it is comfortable, because curiosity is a hunger, and hunger makes you do strange things. You will always be a mammal with soft skin and wet lungs. The universe will always be a place that prefers vacuum and radiation and extreme temperatures. So you will always need a bubble. And if you are going to live in a bubble, you might as well learn to maintain it. That is the real legacy of those early EVAs. Not romance, not flags. Maintenance culture. The idea that you can survive harsh places if you respect them, and if you treat your systems like sacred boring tools. And if that sounds like it drains the magic out of it, good. Magic is what you believe when you do not understand the mechanism. Understanding is what lets you repeat the miracle, so you keep drifting across environments, noticing the repeating patterns. Pressure differentials, heat flow, gas chemistry, water behavior. And now, since you have been thinking about vacuum and pressure and seals for so long, your mind naturally wanders to something worse than pressure. Radiation. Radiation is the enemy you cannot feel, and that makes it the most honest horror. In low Earth orbit, you are still partly protected by Earth's magnetic field. It deflects many charged particles, guiding them into belts and auroras. But protection is not the same as absence. Cosmic rays, high-energy particles from distant supernovae, and other violent astrophysical events still arrive. Solar energetic particles, bursts from the sun during flares and coronal mass ejections, can spike the radiation environment suddenly. Your suit provides limited shielding. Some materials stop some particles, but high-energy radiation is stubborn. The most dangerous events are the ones that deliver a lot of dose quickly. A major solar particle event could be serious. The strategy is time and shelter. You limit EVA duration. You monitor solar activity. You have a storm shelter concept, more relevant in later missions and designs. Apollo missions were short, and they got lucky with solar weather. Luck is a real component of early spaceflight, and it always has been. People do not like that fact because it is not comforting, but it is true. Still, radiation risk is managed the same way everything else is managed, with monitoring, procedures, and conservative planning. No heroics, just fewer exposures. And that brings you back to the practical reality of living in harsh places. It is never one big thing. It is a pile of small things that you must handle every day. Heat, cold, pressure, chemistry, fatigue, radiation, debris, human error. You survive by turning them into chores. Chores are survivable. And with that, your imagination can slide back down to Earth again, because Earth is full of places where the same principles apply, even if you do not call it spaceflight. High-altitude mountaineering is a pressure problem. Low oxygen, cold, dehydration, radiation exposure from thinner atmosphere. Deserts are thermal management problems. Heat load, water loss, salt balance. The Arctic is a heat loss problem plus logistics. Batteries die faster, materials get brittle, frost forms on everything. Submarines are air quality problems. Carbon dioxide buildup, oxygen generation, humidity control. Every extreme environment is an argument for engineering. And engineering, when it is done right, looks boring. So when you picture Apollo astronauts again, you can let the scene be unromantic. A man in a stiff suit, moving slowly, hands aching, checking his tether, listening to fans, calling out numbers, turning a fastener with the patience of someone assembling furniture. Except the instruction manual is written by physics. He finishes the task, he stows the tool, he rechecks the tether, he looks at Earth briefly, not to be poetic, but because it is there. Then he goes back inside, because outside is not a place you linger. And inside, he floats in stale air, sweaty, tired, relieved. He helps inspect the suit. He notes the wear. He becomes data for the next design. That is how exploration actually works. It is not one heroic leap. It is 1,000 small corrections made because the environment punishes the wrong choices. And since you have been thinking about those punishments, you might notice one last quiet theme tying everything together. Time. Not clock time. Exposure time. How long you can stay outside. How long you can tolerate heat load. How long your cooling water lasts. How long your battery supports fans and radios. In harsh environments, time is always a consumable. On Earth, you rarely think that way. You think time is something you spend watching videos or staring at ceilings. In space, time is oxygen. Time is heat. Time is fatigue. So every EVA is a negotiation with time. It starts with a plan. Then it becomes a series of check-ins. How is your oxygen supply? How is your carbon dioxide scrubber? How is your cooling? How is your heart rate? How are your hands? Because if your hands fail, the EVA ends early. If your cooling fails, the EVA ends early. The environment decides. You just comply, and when you comply early enough, you get to do another one later. That is the boring truth of survival. You do not win. You manage. And now that you have been living in this management mindset for a while, it becomes easier to imagine the next environments on the list, not as exotic postcards, but as systems problems. The moon is dust and temperature swing and radiation exposure. Mars is thin air and cold and dust and long-distance logistics. Venus is pressure and heat and chemistry. The deep ocean is pressure and darkness and slow rescue. Each one is just a different flavor of the same lesson. Keep the bubble intact, keep the inside stable, respect the outside. And as you continue drifting through these thoughts, you can feel how the story wants to keep expanding. From suits to habitats, to entire worlds engineered for fragile animals. Because once you start thinking of life as a set of controlled conditions, you cannot stop noticing how thin the control really is. Even something as simple as a window. A spacecraft window is a pressure boundary. It must be transparent and strong. It must resist impacts. It must handle thermal cycling. It must not fog. It must not crack. On Apollo, windows were small and layered, multiple panes with redundancy, so a single crack would not become a sudden catastrophe. Still, micrometeoroid pitting happened, tiny impacts that left little scars. You can imagine seeing those scars later in inspection, little white marks, tiny evidence that the universe touched your bubble and moved on. The universe is always touching your bubble. On Earth, you call it weathering. In space, you call it micrometeoroids, atomic oxygen erosion, ultraviolet degradation. Atomic oxygen is another fun one. In low Earth orbit, you are still brushing against the outer fringes of Earth's atmosphere. It is extremely thin, but it exists. Ultraviolet sunlight breaks apart oxygen molecules into single oxygen atoms. Those atoms are highly reactive. They slam into spacecraft surfaces at orbital speed and slowly erode materials. Paint degrades, polymers get etched, surfaces dull. It is like sandblasting with chemistry. So even in orbit, the environment is not nothing. It is a thin, aggressive mix of radiation and sparse particles moving fast enough to matter. And you, in your suit, are swimming through that without the swimming. It is just you and the boundary layers of your life support system. That is why maintenance never ends. That is why inspection matters. That is why boring is the highest compliment, because boring means you are still in control. And control in harsh environments is always temporary, which is why the next thing your mind wants to touch is the way humans try to make temporary control feel permanent. Redundancy. You do not bring one system, you bring two. You do not trust a single valve. You add backups. You add manual overrides. You design so a failure does not cascade. Apollo had redundancy where mass allowed it, not infinite redundancy, because weight is expensive, but enough that single failures would not automatically kill. In suits, oxygen supply and pressure integrity are critical. Life support is designed with conservative margins. Emergency oxygen exists in some designs. Alarms exist. Procedures exist. And yet, you cannot back up everything. You cannot back up the laws of physics. So redundancy is not a guarantee. It is an attempt to make failure less likely and less sudden. That attempt is what separates exploration from suicide. And it is the same attempt you see in every extreme environment story. Submarines have backup air systems. Mountaineers carry redundant oxygen bottles on some climbs. Polar stations have backup generators because if the bubble fails, the outside rushes in, not as a villain, as an equation. And when you see survival as an equation, you start seeing modern life differently too. Your house has pressure boundaries. Your windows are seals. Your heater is thermal control. Your refrigerator is a tiny cryogenic box. Your ventilation system scrubs air in its own crude way. You live in engineered comfort that would look like luxury to an Apollo astronaut, and yet you still complain when the room is slightly too warm. That is not hypocrisy. That is adaptation. Humans adapt to whatever baseline they are given. Then they treat deviations as problems. In space, the baseline is fragile, so you treat everything as a problem before it becomes one. That is the habit Apollo helped build. And as the habit spreads forward, it enables longer, stranger missions, space stations, repair missions, construction in orbit, long-duration habitation, which means more spacewalks, more tethers, more gloves, more tired hands and calm voices. The ritual continues. And with that ritual in mind, you can let your imagination settle into another quiet scene. You are outside again, not because you want drama, but because something needs doing. Your tether is clipped, your suit is pressurized, the fans are singing their mechanical lullaby. Your breath is loud, your gloves are stubborn. You move hand over hand along a rail. Each motion is deliberate. Each pause is a small check-in with your body. You glance toward the sun, and you feel the heat building on the suit's outer layers. You drift into shade, and the warmth drains away. You are not thinking about beauty. You are thinking about finished torque and tool alignment. And that is the real secret of spacewalking. The view is not the main event. The main event is keeping your hands working. Because hands are how humans interact with the world. Hands are how you turn a hostile environment into a manageable one. And in a suit, your hands are trapped inside thick gloves that want to undo your grip. So you become patient. You become the kind of creature that can do a difficult thing slowly, without panicking, because panic wastes oxygen. And that patience is the bridge, the quiet bridge to every other deadly beautiful place you might visit next.